let's shift over to the A10 before we wrap up our college hoops segment, because I want to do a little preview here of what's to come for Fordham potentially. And I think the biggest thing I can say about the Atlantic-10 this year is that I think it's a lot stronger than last year, even though last year you had Dayton at the top and who was arguably the best team in the entire country a year ago. You don't have that type of team this year where you're going to have a dominant force throughout the entire conference, but I think that the A10 is a lot deeper than it was a year ago, and you have a bunch of teams at the top of the fold that are going to beat each other up a little bit. I personally think Richmond is the best team in the conference. They were picked preseason to win it. They have 4 balanced scores. I mean, Gilliard, Grant Golden, you have KO as well. They have a lot of guys who can score, including Blake Francis, to go with that. St. Louis is going to be really good. They have a tough test today against LSU, which hasn't happened yet as of this recording, but it'll be interesting to see how they fare against them. I mean, 2 of the best guards in the nation in Jordan Goodwin and Javonte Perkins, 2 guys who will get a 10 Player of the Year consideration and All-American consideration for that matter. And even though Dayton lost Obi Toppin, their backcourt's terrific. I mean, Jalen Crutcher was arguably the best guard in the Atlantic-10 last year. I will say about the A10 also is that some of the best guards in the entire nation are in this conference. I mean, you go down the list of Gilliard, Perkins, Goodwin, Fats Russell at URI, who was terrific last year. There's a lot of guys who can play, and maybe the best player in this conference isn't even a guard, and that's Trey Mitchell on UMass, who took a big step forward last year. So I think the biggest difference about this conference this year than last year is that the depth at the top is a lot better than it was last year. And I think Richmond's a top 20 team. I think St. Louis is going to be in the top 25 at some point soon. I think URI can play. They've lost their first 2 games at the hands of Arizona State and BC, who looked really good and gave Nova a run for their money. But I think URI is going to be a really tough team to play in this conference. And I think as a whole, I think it's going to be a lot of really good games this year in the Atlantic-10. And there's going to be a lot of tough games as well, because usually going on the road is really difficult. Without fans, it's obviously a little different this year, but with the level of play at the top of this conference, it's going to be a lot more difficult to win games this year than it was a year ago.
For sure. And I think that it's funny because the popular thought is that Dayton last year was Obi Toppin and that was it. Mm-hmm. And that was just absolutely not the case. And they're a team that can certainly contend. I really like St. Louis, though, because I think that they're just so experienced. And you touched on the number of players that they have. I would add Hassan French into that Correct. As well, as a guy who's going to really lead them this year. But that's just a team top to bottom that you feel like they're returning almost every player of consequence from them last year. And in this broken season, that to me is a big deal with the continuity and having players who have played together and know what's expected in sort of that program. I think that's going to be a big advantage, but also not to diminish. I think Dayton is right there as well. And Richmond, as you mentioned as well. I really like what Dayton does. I think Anthony Grant is one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in the conference, and what he did to develop and help develop Obi Toppin. And is Dayton going to walk away with another player who's on that level because Anthony Grant keeps churning them out? Who the heck knows? So I agree with in second, everything that you said about the depth being just so much greater at the top. And that's going to make it a huge challenge for Fordham going forward. And we talk about this and how difficult that this A10 conference has become at the top. And there are some really good programs here. And you're talking about, okay, well, St. Louis can be in the top 25 and Richmond and Dayton and there's 3 in the A10. So that's a really difficult task for the team that we're paying attention to in Fordham going forward. And this is just a really good conference and has become one over the last couple of years.
Yeah, and Dayton bring back Chapman and Watson too. I mean, their big losses were obviously Toppin and Mike Sell from a year ago. But like you mentioned, I mean, when you have Anthony Grant, who was a coach of the year a year ago in the entire nation, you're going to be successful regardless. And I mean, VCU lost a lot of guys, but they've played some teams tough early on. They played West Virginia tough the other day. And Nashawn Highland's a really good player. And the way they play just gives a lot of teams trouble. So like you mentioned, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch in the Atlantic-10.